Hi, and welcome back to our series of diving deep on the podcast Novelty Novelist. I'm your host, Jennings, and today we're going to be continuing our series with Truman Capote. But first, I want to thank Time Capsule for sponsoring this podcast. If you don't know what a time capsule is, you're really missing out. A time capsule is something where you store your memories from a year, you bury it somewhere, and then 20 years from now, you go dig it up and you just relive all the memories. Time capsules are great because they help you think about your future and just how the future could be, but they also let you put in things from your past so that in the future you can see how different it was or how you predicted the future to be. Time capsules are a great thing for kids because they allow for them to just grow up and then look back on their childhood. Time capsules are on sale today. If you go to timecapsule.com, they are $19.99. Thank you again, Time Capsule, for sponsoring this podcast. And I just wanted to thank you for coming out again today.
Hey, thank you for having me back for this last day. I'm excited to talk about the significance of my book and why it was so important and what it did for the rest of literature after it was written.
So, Truman, our first question is, how did In Cold Blood set up a platform for future crime-related works?
Yeah, after my book was published, the true crime genre flourished, and that was when true crime really started to become something that people looked into and studied more. You have read my book, right? So when you read it, did you feel like it was a movie? Could you feel where the camera would cut and the scene would change?
Yes, I noticed all of that, and I loved how that would keep me so interested in what was going to happen. It was not that I was concerned about who killed the Clutters, but how they were killed and why, because the motives were interesting. That's what set me off and wanted me to keep reading the book.
Yes, that was exactly my goal. I wanted to create this genre not to be circled around who did the crime, but rather the motives of the crime. The whole idea was to create a novel that felt nonfiction, and all the details were there, and the only fiction I had to insert were little details such as the dreams and the conversations. I did research this case for years. I gathered an immense amount of data, and I talked to just about everyone who had heard of the Clutters. I really connected myself with Holcomb, which allowed for the story to grow, and it helped to fill in some of those gaps. And I was really creating relationships, which furthered my novel. I created a relationship with Perry, Holcomb, and a lot of other people as well.
See, that's so interesting because people would think the whole book is nonfiction, but you say it's not. Do you think that this impacted your work?
Of course that impacted the book, but the details were not far from the truth. They were realistic. I did not want to take anything away from the nonfiction aspect of the book by adding something that was totally off base and something that couldn't make sense. I know we talked about that a little bit earlier, but it really did impact the book because it left the reader the ability to make some assumptions on their own. It leaves room for interpretation, and it leaves room for the reader to really make their own assumptions, which I feel is a very important aspect of any book that anybody is reading or writing.
And I think ever since your book was written, we've seen a shift in literature. What do you think caused this?
Well, I think the answer to that question is pretty simple. We have seen a shift in literature ever since, but I think that I really just introduced a new way of writing. And every now and then people do want to change, and that's what I gave them. And it turns out it kickstarted a new movement, and that's something that people will always appreciate. Before we go, I want to touch on the interpretation part a little bit and how it's open for the readers to interpret. I think that truly is one of the most important aspects of any book, and I researched so much for this book to happen, and so I think that, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and I wanted people to continue researching it, answer some of those questions that I didn't know or that I didn't figure out, and I think that that's one of the really important parts of literature is that people can be inspired to research something and be inspired to learn something new. And so I just wanted that aspect to be present in my book.
Well, we really want to thank you for coming in and just joining us. This is such a treat, and we're so glad we got to hear all about your book and just your influences and the impact it left and your intent on writing it. It was so neat to hear all the details, and we really hope our audience appreciated everything, and we just appreciate you coming in.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Jennings. It was truly a pleasure. I'm glad that I as I said, got to answer some of those questions, and I really hope that you will have me back in the future. It was an honor to be featured on this podcast, and I'll be looking forward to future interactions. Thanks so much.